Foster here for the Field of 60. Today, we are bringing you another episode in our Off the Carousel series, where we will be joined by each and every new head coach to the Division I ranks. There are almost 60 of them. We're going to be rolling these out a couple of days throughout the month of May and the month of June. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And if you like this interview, don't be afraid to tap that like button. That stuff really does help our channel and help our presence on YouTube. It helps more people like you find this content. And since I have you guys here, make sure that you check out our Instagram and TikTok pages. We are going to be pumping out more unique content over there throughout the summer heading into next season. Like, for example, did you know that Penny Hardaway was shot when he was a player in college? I bet you didn't know that. There are more stories like that on those pages. The links are in the description below. So now, without further ado, let's get into another edition of Off the Carousel.
Folks, welcome back to another episode of Off the Carousel, Field of 68 off-season interview series. I am Matt Cox with Three Man Weave, joined by the newly minted head honcho, Chris Jans, Mississippi State, Hail State, as they say down there in Stark Vegas. Coach, how are you doing on this fine Monday afternoon?
What's up, Matt? Pretty good. My Monday's off to a good start. That means my week's off to a good start. So hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, you just shared behind the scenes. You just purchased a new house. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Congratulations on that, man. I know that's a big undertaking every time you make these types of moves.
Yeah, it's a bullet point that continues to get larger the longer you put it off. So, like all the coaches, wife and family to and from, and we're no different. And this was her second trip since we got the job initially, and we were successful in finding a home. And certainly we've got to, get the loan approved and make sure the appraises and all that good stuff. But I'll leave most of that to her. And here in the next 6-7 weeks, we'll hopefully be transitioning and settling into our new home in Starkville, Mississippi.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, we were myself, my two colleagues, Kai and Jim, had dinner with Jeff Goodman, actually, Las Vegas. This was, I believe, the opening round of the NCAA tournament. So a couple of weeks back. And this was after the job had opened, before you had officially accepted it. We're just sitting there kind of going back, talking about the coaching carousel stuff as college basketball media guys like to do, thinking about who would be a good fit where. And we all sat there and said, potential prospects to fill that Mississippi State void. We all said your name. And we thought that'd just be a home run hire given your track record, your history, just what you've proven as a coach, X and O wise, like I said, your esteemed resume, 3-time WAC coach of the year, and a pretty good fit there in the SEC. It checked all the boxes. Is that kind of how it felt to you when you took the job? Like, this is an automatic no-brainer opportunity? Or was it more of a hesitation given what you had going at Mexico State the last, especially the last 5 years?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate that. My name was coming out of your esteemed gentleman's.
We spoke it into existence. You're welcome. That's right.
Appreciate that. Yeah, maybe that was part of why this happened. But once I got involved in the job and learned more about it, certainly I felt like, hey, this is in my wheelhouse. This could potentially be something that would work for both parties. You guys probably sit around talking about this kind of stuff all the time and give your opinions to one another about, who was hired and was that a good fit or not. And certainly a lot of people have made mention that this looks on paper anyway to be a good fit. And, we're 5-6 weeks into our tenure, and it certainly feels like it is thus far. We're obviously a long way from, putting our team on the floor, and with the landscape of college basketball, who knows how long it'll take to get to that point, to have a full roster, et cetera. But yeah, we were really happy at New Mexico State. We were there for 3 years, and then we moved within Las Cruces, and not many coaches do that. We had a nice home in Cruces when we first got there, got settled. And then after we were there for a while, we're like, hey, this may be where we end up until they kick us to the curb. We may coach here until they say, hey, we've had enough of you, and we're going to move on. And so I said, hey, let's act as if that's the case. Let's buy a home that we'd like to be in for 10, 15 years, and knock on wood that, they'll allow us to be here for that long a time. And so we did. And again, not many coaches move 3 years in to a tenure at a mid-major school, but we were happy and comfortable, and we're going to prepare for that. So I wasn't freaking out about the next job or, am I going to get another opportunity at this level? Not another opportunity, but a opportunity to coach at this level. And I think maybe that attitude may have helped us alleviate some pressure that way too. So we were happy. But these opportunities are hard to come by. And, I'm not saying it was a no-brainer, but in the end of the day, we weren't going to say no, regardless of the situation. Just to have this challenge to coach in this league at this level and under the bright lights. So we're pretty excited about it and grateful at the same time.
Yeah, the one coach that came to mind as a comparison relative to your prior situation you just talked about in Mexico State, Pat Kelsey, a guy at Winthrop, in a position to year over year dominate that league and put yourself in an advantageous position to make the tournament on an annual basis, right? And that's kind of what you had there in Mexico State, 2018, 2019, 2020. Then COVID threw the biggest wrench into your program, in my opinion, of any other, program in the country. Put that all behind you. You're right. You're 5 weeks into this thing. Seems like it's been a year since you were officially brought on. You're in the whirlwind right now of the offseason portal momentum. You've already locked down 2 critical cogs, getting Tolu Smith and Shaquille Moore to come back. And as I look at your roster, the way it's shaping up, you're really dipping in all the different wells, right? JUCO, where you have a lot of prior experience. You're looking at bringing in kids from the other D1 schools via the portal. And then the whole notion of re-recruiting. Just want to, hear your thoughts on how you tried to balance your time and how do you try and strategize with, like I said, the re-recruiting of existing players when you first come in versus the go out and attack and get new players and try and replenish that roster on the fly in such a short time, what feels like a mad dash against, the arms races of coaches that you have in the SEC.
Right. Every coach that's been interviewed will tell you that one of the questions is always the same, right? There's some standard questions that are always asked by the people in the room. And certainly I think coaches ask the similar questions as well. And one of them is always, what's your 30, 60, 90-day plan? What are you going to focus on? And I've been doing it long enough now where, you expect that question, and the answers have changed over time. But for me, it was simple, and it's still working on that. But on game day, when you exit the locker room to the floor, who's in the room with you? To me, that's what I'm focused on is who's in the room, from not just the players. And certainly that's the number one priority, but your staff, the trainer, the strength coach, the managers, because a lot of people have some input and can impact positive or negatively the outcome of these games. But the most important people are the ones that you walk out with, in my opinion, on game day to actively, impact the wins or loss or how you play, et cetera. So I'm still focused on that. In terms of managing my days, as you well know, there's a lot of things that you have to do when you're new. And there's a lot of things that every coach has to do in the off season, but when you're new, it adds to it, like the house purchasing and, where does that fall in line? Certainly for, most wise, it's number one on the list, but for the coach, it's not always that, you're not always in the same synergy with how they want to get it done in a timely manner. So, just really focused on, like you said, and there's a lot of different buckets, re-recruiting your own team. And that's everywhere, not just when you're new. You're behind when you're new because you don't have relationships, but I don't care if you're new or not. There's always at least one to how many returnees that you feel like a staff you got to recruit. And that happened last year, so it's not as if you didn't have that thought process. And, even at New Mexico State, we were very fortunate that we had a lot of great players returned last year that could have went elsewhere, had opportunities to go elsewhere, and they came back. So, I think when that happens, it makes you feel good about how you're treating your kids and what's going on behind the scenes and how much better they're getting. Otherwise, they're going to jump ship the first chance that they get, especially in the new landscape. So, but these guys here don't know me. They don't know anything about me. And so, developing relationships with them is just as important as developing relationships with potential new recruits. And we're smack dab in the midst of trying to do all that right now.
The one thing about New Mexico State, we're just thinking about the types of teams you had. Now, as you look to make that jump to the SEC, you want to come in, obviously, and establish, a competitive roster, be as good as you can right off the bat, but you probably don't want to take any shortcuts, right? And think about the long-term developing a foundation for, the identity of the culture, to use the almighty buzzwords there, that'll be sustainable for the long term. From my vantage point, from our vantage point, there was a very clear DNA in which you guys played with New Mexico State, right? Long, athletic, versatile, physical, those types of traits seem to pop on a year-to-year basis. Is that something you're trying to transpose as you come to Mississippi State, or have you thought more about, maybe as you step up in class, you're looking to maybe have a different type of approach, a different type of player prototype that you recruit?
Yeah, I've been transparent from the jump with in the interview process, at the press conference, any interviews that I've given. When people ask me about this, I'm not trying to build a program. I'm not worried about building blocks. The only building blocks that I'm concerned about is the standard of expectation that we're having, the work ethic that we want every day, the mental approach, physical approach that we want every day. That's the building blocks. But in terms of finding players to build your program upon, I think that's dead. I don't think that's where we're at in college basketball. I'm trying to build a team for next year. And I'm not worried about any other year than that. Like, even last couple of years, staff would come to me, hey, there's a junior college kid with 3 years. And I started telling them, I don't care. I don't care if it's 1, 2, or 3. Yeah. How good are they right now? How much can they impact us next year? And that's all I'm concerned about, is next year's team. If a guy has 2, 3 years of eligibility, does that make it a little more appealing? Yeah, but nothing like it used to. And so our attitude and our approach is, who can help us next year? We're after those guys that can give us a chance to be competitive and to win as many games as possible. But the days of building a program are over. I mean, for most people and most programs, I'm sure there are certain situations, maybe, because of an academic situation, that you have to still look at it that way, et cetera, or, because of transferring credits and all those standards that maybe other schools would have at the highest level of the academic world. But I think most of us are pretty focused on just year in and year out, putting a team together.
Yeah, it seems like that's the way the winds are blowing. I mean, look at Jay Wright, Villanova, right? One of the few outliers who seem to have that type of year-to-year roster continuity, but just the difficulty of maintaining that in today's day and age, near impossible. You talk about how important it is just to win now, right? Put all the bogus future stuff aside, build the best roster you can for next year with guys that are ready to contribute right away. I think one of the domains in which the ponds in which you fish in is that JUCO pond. Yeah, one of your SEC comrades, Dennis Gates, has had some success recruiting there as well. You obviously know that area like the back of your hand. Chris Beard, a notable coach who came through the JUCO ranks. What is it about that talented that pool of players that either you feel like you can tap into so effectively, or where you have an advantage recruiting relative to other competitors now at the Power 6 level?
Well, I think first of all, sometimes I think the junior college ranks get a bad rep. Some people try to stereotype those kids, and I've coached, 4 different ones as a head coach, and some of the best kids I've ever coached were started at junior college for whatever reason. And so I don't look at them with that lens. And I think that once you get involved with a junior college prospect, you get some street cred, because you coached in junior college. And so the relatability maybe is a little different in those situations. And certainly with the coaches and the staff, they are trying to get, most of them are trying to get to where we're at now. And so I think that all, helps a little bit in terms of getting off to a good start with recruiting some junior college players. And we've had a lot of success with them everywhere I've been. It's not just New Mexico State, but, the previous stops that I had as either an assistant or a head coach, we've had some success with those kind of guys. And I think junior college kids look to that. Hey, is this guy coached JUCO guys? How have they done? And their JUCO coaches are telling them that. Don't go somewhere where they're not accustomed to having transfers or having guys for a year or two. And, that brings me to the point of like this whole landscape, like for guys like me, and there's a lot of us out there, like we're not uncomfortable in this space, having guys for a year or two, because it's familiar with us. It doesn't freak us out at all. And, it's a lot more sprint recruiting than marathon recruiting. Is just not the same. You're certainly going to have some of that with the best high school players in your region, in the country. But for the most part, it's going to be a lot more sprint recruiting that's going to be going on.
I like that term, sprint recruiting. So when we talk about the balance between, and this is at least how some people like to frame the different types of recruiting strategy. One lane, you have a certain prototype, you want to recruit to that prototype, a certain type of player, or try and fill needs, versus you go out and get the best players there, and then you can build, the blueprint around that talent. Is there, for as you go from New Mexico State, Mississippi State, is there going to be a change in that approach because of this sprint recruiting, because of the stuff of the competition, or is your general approach with recruiting, player acquisition, roster management, will that still stay kind of the same as it has been?
Yeah, it's a great question. And especially since, like, for us and a lot of programs, we're still in the midst of trying to put it together. Your philosophical approach is one thing, but when it's, live action, so to speak, like we are now, you've got to make decisions on, one, who you go after. Two, if you get someone, how does it pair with, the guys you have, and, who you need to get now to make up needs, et cetera. So I'm still of the mentality right now of we're trying to build a team. I want some right guys along the roster, if you will, to have depth and have competition. But at some point, you may have to go, hey, I got to get the best players available to me and figure it out. Now, I'm not there yet, but I can see how it could get to that point where you may have an extra big or an extra guard, then maybe you would choose to do so. But right, beggars can't be choosers at some point, and I'm not there yet. And I don't think most programs are probably there yet, but it's around the corner. The portal's closing up, and who knows how that's going to play out the rest of the summer of kids, still bouncing around or not. I mean, that's a whole nother, obviously, a podcast, but that's a great question. And right now, my mindset is, like I said, to still try to put it together like we always do, but that could change here shortly.
So everyone's talked about the whole NIL wild, wild west. Obviously, you walk into the eye of that storm in the SEC. A lot's been made of the, super mega deals that, Arkansas has inked some kids to, and there's plenty of blue blood programs in that league. Coming from New Mexico State to Mississippi State, I'm sure you guys weaponized it to some degree, or were thinking about that, toward the latter years of your tenure there. Now you move up to the SEC. I mean, is this like a whole new greenfield space for you, or do you feel like you've started to think about this and you're, more or less ready to compete now with the Joneses of the SEC in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's the hot topic, right? All over the country. I see the same things that you see on social media. Probably hear more stories, maybe on the daily basis from, different coaches that we talk to about, apparent deals that are happening, and the amount of money that we're talking about here. First of all, I think it's awesome that these opportunities are there for the student athletes to have them comfortable, while they're getting their education, while they're pursuing, for a lot of them, at least around our level, professional aspirations. Again, I don't know if this is what the NCAA set out to do, but this is where it's at right now. And it's just mind-boggling at times. And you either have to adapt and change as a university and as a coaching staff, or you're going to get left behind. And the universities that are behind. And hopefully, those that are, for the coaches' perspective anyway, are trying to play catch up. Some are ahead of others, but at least for the short time period, this is the way it's going to look like and feel like and sound like. And you have to get in the game. Certainly, you mentioned New Mexico State. We were thinking about that. We were very involved, and we're, I think, ahead of the game, probably, at least for that level, which, the staff that's there now is reaping the benefits of that. And now that we've transitioned over to the Mississippi State, like you said, we're trying to, keep up with the Joneses. And the other component of that is, there's the liar's poker component, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Of people saying one thing, but is it actually true? And,
right.
Why are they saying that? What motivations behind that? And, you're just trying to wade through it and find the truth, if you will, or at least as close to it as you can get. And then, make any adjustments you have to make. But it's definitely a different world. I don't think anyone could have predicted it, that was going to be quite like this 2-3 years ago, but we're knee deep in it and we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it seems like no one really knows what's going on. So everyone flying by the seat of their pants, I suppose. I was going to ask you, I was mandated to ask you, Mr. Jans, what is the funniest, craziest, or most entertaining recruiting story you have? And you've been doing this for quite some time. That dates back to 1991 was your first year at Elmhurst, I believe, not too far from my humble abode in Chicago. Obviously, there's going to be some funny ones that will pop up as you get into this NIL stuff, but just thinking back over the many years in which you've gone after players, like just, one for the storybooks, if you have one.
Oh gosh, I hate when I get asked these questions about, what do you most remember about this player? When did you know when, he was going to be this kind of guy? And I'm just not great at that. But the thing that it's not that funny, it's just how recruiting works sometimes is when I were at Wichita State, we were recruiting a highly coveted junior college player named Clay Anthony Early.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So ended up being drafted by the Knicks, and he came on his visit, right? 2-night visit. And we had awful storms in Wichita, and the plane schedule was all screwed up, and he ended up having to stay like 4 or 5 nights. And it was like a 5-day deal, and I'm sure people are going, yeah, right. But I promise you, he couldn't get out, as a coach, as assistant coach, like, okay, what am I going to do all day long?
Entertain the kid. Oh, it's tough.
2 nights, 3 days. But it turned out, he loved it, and he spent all this time and, kind of built relationships with people in a short period of time, because he was stuck in Wichita for basically almost a week, or at least 5-day period, because of the weather. And we ended up getting him. And obviously he was a great player for us and was a part of great teams, and ended up getting drafted in the NBA by the Knicks. But when you say that crazy story, I mean, I've just never been anywhere where you hosted a kid on a recruiting
for a whole week.
For a week. I'm glad it worked out. Certainly, if it didn't, it probably wouldn't have felt too good about, where we were at the time and where we were living. But it worked out for everybody.
No, that's one of the all-time Wichita State players during the heyday of the Shockers. So hey, Mr. Goodman required that I ask you about your substitute teaching, serving as a valet at a club when you were first getting into coaching. We just did some research behind the scenes. Your official title, I believe, at Elmhurst was activities director. Tell us about that little stint and how that prepped you to man the ship of one of the SEC's programs.
Since Mr. Goodman asked, I'll have to.
Yeah, you do.
So my first few years in the business, I mean, I don't know if you could start any lower. I mean, I was basically an unpaid. I think my salary was $500 or $1,000 for the year at Elmhurst, Division III. Worked with a great guy in Scott Trost, who's now at Lewis, and my first mentor I ever had. But as I look back, I was in college coaching for 7 years before all I did was basketball. Like 7 full years before all I did was coach basketball. None of my salary was coming from a different title as I look back, which I never really thought about that till right now. Certainly I did, at different times in my life, but not recently. And so at Elmhurst, my first 2 years, I did a lot of odd jobs on the weekends. Once I got hooked up with this company, I would valet cars at the hot clubs and, the trendy places. And, I'm 23, 24, and, these dudes.
It's not a bad gig. Not a bad gig, man.
I'm running to the car and I'm like driving these cars going, oh my God, is this nice? Like really nice cars. The hours weren't the best because, they're usually open pretty late at night. And then I substitute taught during the day, around our schedule as best I could while at Elmhurst. And I worked a lot of basketball camps at that time. And then when I went to Grandview College in Des Moines, Iowa, that's where I was the activities director. I was responsible for bringing the like comedians and bands and things like that to campus, along with I was the men's residence hall director. So I lived in an apartment in the men's hall. We had a men's dorm and a woman's dorm. And that was back in the day we had pagers, so if something was wrong and, right. I wasn't on campus, I would get a page and I'd have to hurry back to campus and figure out what the heck was going on, fulfill my duties. So, none of, you know how that goes. Like they give you these titles and these jobs so you can actually do what you want. It's just coach basketball, but your money and your insurance and everything else is tied to these other titles and responsibilities. But yeah, 7 years until I was just strictly basketball. And I mean, I thought at that point I was so excited that I didn't have to do anything else but coach ball and recruit and everything else that comes with it. But quite a few jumps and different types of hats I had to wear at a young age to, continue to chase these dreams.
Yeah. There's no more thankless job than an RA. I can attest as being on the other side of that relationship, just making that person's life a miserable hell for my first freshman year. So props to you for doing that. Who is the biggest gig you landed? Comedian band as activities director? Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews Band. Who'd you get?
We weren't in that stratosphere. We were NAI Division II in Des Moines, Iowa. Our budget wasn't like that.
No, not quite there.
No. It was more local comedians and, a band, for a big weekend or something like that. So, yeah. And when I was at Kirkwood Junior College, I was a head coach. And I was in charge of basically they would get class credit for going in the community and doing basically community service. We had a name for it. I can't remember exactly what it was, but so I had to go out and meet with all these business owners and different things and get students into their, it wasn't an internship. It was much shorter than that. But like my list of people to call was like 50, 60 deep and try to pair them up with students. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of time to do that kind of stuff. And, you try to schedule it around practice, obviously, as best you can.
Well, folks, that's why he's a grinder. Chris Jans, best of luck as you embark on this daunting task of going toe-to-toe with the SEC heavy hitters, in which there are plenty at this point. One last question, put you on the spot before I let you go, Chris. Of the SEC landscape, what team, what program, and I won't let you say Kentucky just because I feel like that's the obvious answer. Which of these schools' programs scares you as like a sneaky dark horse that you're just not looking forward to coaching against, playing against, or you see just sort of an up and coming, shooting star in the way the program's bubbling? Anything that kind of catches your eye around the league?
There's a lot to choose from. Some great coaches, great programs. My first reaction is I'm not scared of any of them.
That's the right answer. Attaboy. Good.
I don't fear any of them, but at the same time, I respect a lot of them, and I got some great coaches and players, and we certainly got a lot of work to do, and I've got a lot to learn, and we're behind, and I understand that, and every day is crucial, but to single one out would be hard to do, but we definitely have some steep hills to climb for sure.
You do. You'll get there, though. Chris Jans, everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Off the Carousel weekly interview series presented by the Field of 68. I'm Matt Cox. Take care until next time.